How's it going?
I'm doing really well. How are you, Jen?
I'm doing pretty good. I have to say, as I'm getting older, more and more working out, it's not just to work out, it's to live. So, and I tell this to a lot of the students I meet because they just assume because you're, a yoga teacher or, you teach classes often that you're set. But honestly, every morning it's kind of like I have to remind my body that you remember how to move, remember body, how to remove. So really connecting and it might feel different, depend. And I'm so grateful because of yoga. I feel I have this deeper connection with the body. So, instead of panicking, there's a lot of different things we know now that, oh, it's this part, maybe, coming into this twist or maybe just even a full sort of body movement, just doing, either a sun A or doing the moon sequence really enlivens the body and there's less panicking. But I definitely have to do it all the time to connect with my body. How do you feel these days?
Yeah, I think that, as I'm getting more into getting more interested in how the body works, the fascia is a system that's really now there's a lot of talk and awareness around it. And so I think that before we focus so much on muscles and bones, and we don't really think about fascia. Fascia was sort of thought of as sort of the packing material, in the body. But now research has shown that it's so much more than that. And so having now a better understanding of fascia, it it makes so much more sense as to why we might find that certain times of the day that our movements are feeling a little bit more restricted than others, and what kind of exercise would be beneficial for health, and not just so much about, oh, I'm just going to go hard and work out at the gym and lift weights or go for a run. And not that any of those things are bad for you, but without really understanding why we might be feeling a certain way, and also finding a balance, because you tend to find that the type A people might really be drawn to certain types of sports and certain intensity. And then there are the people who really love the slow, restorative um, classes, that perhaps there needs to be a little bit more of a crossover, because we tend to like what we like, but variety is really the key. And so now understanding this whole area around the fascia, then movement is more than just it's so much more than just about getting into shape or anything like that. It's really about, well, what are some healthy ways to keep the body moving and keep our range of movements and keep our tissues healthy, and keep our joints healthy, so that we can age health in a healthy way. Yeah.
I agree. As I meet students, of all different ages, and there is definitely a preference, I think, among ages, and then also among depending on how they live their life, if they're maybe outdoorsy more, if they're gym people, or they're into running, there definitely needs to be sort of a blending of all these different things, not just for muscles, not just for lengthening the body, and then not just rest all the like restorative only. You need and cardio also. And it's always interesting because I meet people who I guess they're very, they're just used to what they're doing. And so they don't realize, unfortunately, until they get older, where I meet friends who might have been runners, but now they don't run anymore because they never stretched as runners. And there's so many different parts of their body are messed up that they're not even allowed to run anymore. Or I've had some friends who, when they were younger, they would just lift weights. It was all about lifting the heavier and heavier weights. And then a lot of them can't do that anymore because they've completely messed up certain parts of their body. So and you hear of people getting yoga injuries as well. So it's not that one thing is better than the other, but like you said, there's this understanding of how it all kind of comes together for the health and well-being of the entire system, right?
Yeah, and I think that you're right in that there's a lot of yoga injuries and injuries in all sorts of sports. And I think that what would, but having said that, yoga provides you more of an opportunity to be mindful in your movements. Whether students are mindful or not in the practice, that's another thing. But yoga um, it really emphasizes the mindfulness and breath. And that's something that I find is um, not as common across the different types of sports. Of course, there are other modalities that also focuses on breath and mindfulness, like Tai Chi, Qigong. But for a lot of the mainstream kind of fitness, there's not a lot of attention placed on mindfulness. Um, and so even though it's great that we're exercising the body and moving the body, there's not a lot of awareness as to what kind of feedback that we're getting as we move the body. And so I think that this feedback is really important for us to start to tap into and start to notice, well, how do I feel when I'm doing this? What are not just how I feel in terms of my mood, but what are the sensations that are coming up for me in my body? And it's really interesting because sometimes students don't even know how they feel in a pose. That, for instance, it's like, does it feel like a stretch or does it feel like a compression? Does it feel like a dull ache or is it a sharp pain? Like we kind of just lump all the sensations and give them an umbrella term and say, oh, it's pain or oh, it's tight or oh, whatever it is. And then we don't actually investigate further. So it's like, oh, it's pain. I've identified it. I can move on. But the body is talking to us as through sensations in very subtle ways, and it's a really rich conversation, really, from the body. But we oftentimes just like, okay, yeah, there it is, move on. And so we don't know how we feel. We don't know that certain areas of the body are actually telling us that, hey, we're not doing great here. Stop this. We have to wait till the really, when the body's shouting at us, it becomes a physical or psychological symptom or an injury for us to then go, oh, something is wrong there. Whereas a lot of these kinds of injuries, especially when we're talking about yoga injuries, it's oftentimes, it's not that you injure yourself the first time in class. Oftentimes it's something that's been, repeating, like the repetitive movements that's been done incorrectly over a number of years, it could be. And then in addition to everything else that's happening in life, maybe you're not sleeping well, maybe you're not hydrated, maybe you're not, maybe you're very stressed out. And all of these things also impact how your body functions. And then without the mindfulness, you're not even aware where your body is at and whether your body is capable of taking on a certain um, posture, let's say, and then we get injured. And these injuries, it didn't happen just on the spot. It's been accumulating, but because we've missed all the signals for so long, that it has to take form in something that's much more intense for us to realize and to pay attention.
Yeah, the disconnect. I think that's something we often, go back and reflect about because people do definitely have this disconnection, unfortunately, with their body, and they're not trained to listen to that feedback, to hear specifically where is that specific pain in the body, or maybe it's that we call it sometimes like a good pain. So maybe it's something that's a discomfort, but it's that comfortable discomfort. So there's a difference, right? And I think also, like you were talking about with yoga, when I meet some people who are mostly into the asanas and maybe they haven't learned yet about the other limbs of yoga and not realizing that, asana is just one part of eight. There's so many, the breath practice, the way you even present yourself in life and interact with other people, which are the yamas and niyamas, and bringing all that together. There's so much more time spent being able to meditate. So the asanas are really that connection to the body. It's an important part, but it's just the one part of yoga that's bringing us into being able to meditate. And then meditation is only just bringing us into being in life. So I think when there's that disconnect, that's when injuries definitely do happen, no matter if you're a yogi or an athlete or, doesn't matter what. Because I agree, I've met people also completely surprised. They're in their 50s, hardly ever exercised. They did one small thing apparently, and they're so surprised that suddenly their knees out or, their hips or their back or something. And they have no idea. They think it's that one thing. Oh, I shouldn't have lifted that one thing on that one day 50 years later in life. But like you said, it was accumulating because they didn't they didn't take care of their core, or they didn't learn the habits of how to lift something properly. And that one last time, yeah, that was the last straw for your body. And it's an interesting thing because people often, they're just so disconnected.
Yeah. And so I think that, with the iRest integrated restoration practice, it really emphasizes body sensing. It really emphasizes sensations in the body. So, of course, in a yoga nidra practice, there's a lot of emphasis on body sensing, and that's probably one many people's favorite part of the practice because it can be deeply relaxing. But it's just really helps us to cultivate a practice of being with sensations in the body, because I don't think that many of us do this on our own, and to even know what it feels like to feel body sensations. Because I know I've worked with a lot of clients where when I ask them, oh, how does it show up in the body as sensation? They may start naming emotions. They may start naming thoughts and beliefs even. And then they attach themselves to these thoughts, beliefs, emotions, and then they take off, right? They start storytelling, and then it's really actually really interesting to see how often I have to direct them back and say, wonderful. Now, how does that feel in your body? How does that feel in your body? And for some clients, they are never in the body. Then they name the next emotion or the next thought. And then you start to see, wow, this is how we live. We don't connect with the body, even when we are in a practice where the practitioner is being guided back to the body over and over again. There's been a number of clients who actually don't even know what that means. They think they are naming sensations in their body, but they're actually not. So this is really interesting.
You make me think of the importance of sleep for some reason. That's come up as I was listening to you, because people forget that um, they're in a yin posture, basically, right? For that 6 to 8 hours that they're sleeping. They're in usually or not, often in an uncomfortable yin position, very messed up, like, and then they wonder why they have certain aches when they get up. Because if you spend 1/3 of your life in this, very weird position, no wonder, right? So it's just so important to have these intentions and this awareness, you know, through all of life, right? Awake and asleep, because even if we're physically asleep, there's still something there that might be conscious, right? So it's really important. All of life is all important.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that for most people, the body sensing practices in Yoga Nidra and in iRest Yoga Nidra can be very, very helpful. I think that even just given an opportunity where you take the time to feel the body, even at the beginning, it's okay if you're naming not naming sensations, but naming emotions and thoughts. But then as we continue with this practice again and again, then we start to perhaps open up this communication with the body, and that as we get more in touch with body sensations in our practice, that perhaps in our daily lives we can also start to tap into body sensations and understanding how I'm feeling in every moment, especially when we are moving or not moving the body, because a lot of the injuries actually may happen because of people being sedentary for most of the time, and then on the weekend they decide to do something because they're like, oh, this whole week I've been, you know, pretty inactive, so I'm going to go and do a long hike. That's my chance. Or I'm going to start, take on this strength class, or whatever it is. And that's when we can really get injured because our bodies are just not prepared. We've been sedentary all week, and so as we start to tap into the body and the intelligence of the body and start listening to what the body's telling us, it's actually guiding us, where we might be feeling tight, what areas we might need to be paying more attention on, and then hopefully we start to cultivate a practice of bringing more movement in life as well. Because once you start tapping into the body, you'll realize that, oh, I've been sitting so long, and this joint is unhappy, or I'm feeling a little bit tight here or there.
Yeah, it's true. As we build greater connection, and then as we can trust the body that it knows exactly what it needs, that it can guide us, right? We don't need to be guided by our cognitive mind, but we can actually be physically guided by our body to tell us what it needs, that it needs to move at this moment, or it needs to stand, or it needs to sit, or that it needs rest, like that we can actually give permission to rest. And I was reflecting that that was a big thing for me as a full-time international school teacher. The only time I really felt that I had a great rest was in Shavasana. That yoga class that I would go to. I'm pretty sure I was snoring away because I kind of felt like completely at ease. Where at home I often felt like I needed to get up at some point to get some more work done. There was always work to get done. And then moving forward, from being a student and really enjoying the Shavasana part to enjoying the Yoga Nidra part, because I first was introduced to Yoga Nidra during my teacher training. And again, it was this, being able to, I couldn't wait because, our teacher would tuck us in with all the blankets, we had all the pillows and cushions, and it was just this deep rest. And in that Yoga Nidra that we were given, it was more directive, but still at the time it was perfect. They would tell us to feel into, the finger, and they might even tell us to relax that finger. But at the time, just spending that moment, I felt like I had permission to go through each finger, each toe, which I wouldn't normally, you know. And then moving on through our iRest practice, where it was just feel the sensation. You don't have to relax anything. Like whatever's alighting in wherever in the body is perfect. That's the perfect sensation. We don't have to judge it or analyze it. So it's beautiful. I feel like, in yoga, we can be offered these invitations, exactly where we're at.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Jen, and do you have any advice for our listeners as to how they might start to cultivate a practice here?
I was going to say, especially for people, I think with autoimmune conditions, because I have an autoimmune condition, I have alopecia areata. And it was really helpful as I started to listen to that messengers that you were talking about, because I feel like I'd missed the messengers many times during my lifetime. And I missed it when I was getting allergies. I missed it when my mind was feeling very full. I missed it when, I was really tired. I kept missing the messengers. And eventually my final messenger was getting the alopecia areata or universalis. And then I saw physically the messenger is, to make it, just like any other important intention, make it an intention to listen to the body, and then make it into a habit where you trust the body to tell you exactly what it needs. So maybe just before you wake up, with intention, just give yourself a minute. Even you could even time yourself just to feel into the body and just notice if there's anything, specifically since we're talking about the body, taking that time for the body. And then maybe just before you go to sleep, even just checking in with the body, and even further to that, if you want to bring in a little bit of movement, that I always tell students, you don't need a yoga mat. You can do it perfectly in your bed or on the sofa. There's so many things that we can offer our body without a yoga mat in normal clothing or pajamas. So just taking that moment with intention before you go to sleep or when you wake up, just to check in. Yeah. What about you? Do you have a suggestion?
Yeah, I mean, when you talked about Shavasana and sleep and rest, I think that we're in a society that really don't prioritize sleep and rest. And even though now the research is coming out and saying this is so important, and we're starting to change our perspectives around it, but we're just being so conditioned that it's almost hard to break out of that cycle of doing. And so I would say find moments of rest. Maybe schedule it in your schedule and say, okay, this 15 minutes or half an hour is my time to be still, to rest, whether it be a meditation, whether it be a shavasana, whether it be a nap, whatever it is, to start prioritizing it as an appointment that is just as important as any other appointment that you might have in your day. And that when we are allowed to slow down, because then that is that permission that we're giving to ourselves, because it's going to be much harder if you're not used to it. And you say, oh, I'm going to find moments to rest. And before you know it, the day's over. So why don't we start to prioritize rest and make it an important appointment that you have for yourself? And then during that time of rest, bring in the body sensing, start to notice as I'm lying here, what does it feel like to lie here? What are the body sensations that are coming up? And it could just be as simple as being open to the different sensations, or it can be more structured, and you might do a body sensing meditation or a yoga nidra practice. Um, but I think that, again, as with anything, these practices need to be done consistently over time for us to start to see the benefits. So whatever that you decide to do, it's not about, oh, I'm doing it once and then yay, it's done. It's more about, well, okay, how can I find a way to incorporate it into my daily life so that now I have a practice such that I can call upon it easier and easier, and it then becomes part of my day without me consciously having to make time for it. And so I think that scheduling time could be a good place to start, especially for those of us who like to schedule and make lists. But for those who, maybe a little bit less structured, just like what you were saying, Jen, is, when you wake up or when you fall asleep, just add a little bit of ritual so to incorporate those practices.
I think those sound great. Well, let us know, what works for you and how you're giving time for your body and how you're speaking and connecting with your body. And we want to hear how that works for you. So let us know. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jen.